Hi, my name is Overi. I'll be presenting on the topic key perspectives in psychology. This will be my assignment for presentation. Psychological perspective offer diverse explanations for human behavior and mental processes. This includes biological, cognitive, psychodynamic, behavioral, and social-psychological approaches. Now, this psychology focuses on learning through different environmental interaction and the influence of others on individual behavior. We have five perspectives in psychology, and these are the biological psychology, the cognitive psychology, the psychodynamic psychology, the social psychology, and the behavioral psychology. My discussion for today will primarily focus on behavioral perspective psychology and the psychological perspectives. Um, while behavioral perspective emphasizes on learning to environmental interaction, the social perspective in psychology explores how the influence of other people can shape our individual behavior. So this is what we'll be looking at in my presentation. We have two description um of behavioral psychology. A description of two psychology, and one of them is the behavioral psychology. Now, behavior is learned through various forms of conditioning or observation learning, and this is like a reinforcement, as reinforcement is the key factor in behavioral psychology. This perspective in psychology was primarily developed by Watson of 1913, Pavlov of 1927, Skinner of 1953, Bandura and Walters of 1967. A person's action can strongly be influenced by their wish to fit in and be accepted into a society. Now, social influence is altering one's behavior to fit in with other people's behavior from the external environment. Describing the social psychology, a social psychologist, Alport of 1924 emphasizes the significant influence of social influence on an individual's behavior or individual's emotions and mental processes. The field of social psychology examines how the perceived presence of other people affect how an individual conducts themselves or how they behave emotionally in the society. An evaluation of the key assumptions of behavioral psychology perspective. I have two major assumptions that's been developed by the behavioral psychology. The behavioral psychologists believe that the behavior is shaped by the environmental stimuli like rewards and penalties, so which are acquired through conditioning, causing individuals to react in a specific way, in a specific kind of way. The two major assumptions in the behavioral psychology that I have pointed out is that behavior is shaped by environmental stimuli like rewards and penalties, like I've said before, and on the behavior can be studied objectively, ignoring objective experiences, emphasizing quantitative data analysis. So two ways can be influenced by the environment and it can be studied objectively. Going forward to talk about the evaluation of the key assumptions of the social psychological perspectives, one would be learning occurs through observation. We're talking about the key assumptions of the social psychological perspectives. I beg your pardon. One would be learning occurs through observation, and the other will be reinforcement and punishment. And punishment have an indirect effect on behavior and learning. While the effect of punishment and reinforcement on behavior and learning are also indirect. This is the assumptions of the social psychological perspectives. There are some key theorists when we talk about the behavioral psychological perspective that contributed to the behaviorist approach. And the major psychologists are One of them will be Ivo Pavlo or in 1987. He talked about classical conditioning, where he focuses on associative learning. Pardon me. Another key major psych theorist in behavioral psychologist is John Watson and Rosalie. John Watson of 1920 and Rosalie Rayner, who conducted the Little Albert experiments at Johns Hopkins University to determine if fear is innate or if fear is learned over time. These theories propose that using classical conditioning to make subjects react fearfully to a stimuli, implying fear is learned and it's not innate. Um, these two psychologists were highly criticized because of the object they used the subject that was used for the experiment. They used a little boy to carry out this experiment, and people think it wasn't humane or okay to use a child for this certain kind of experiments. However, they established the fact that fear can be learned and fear is not innate, can be learned over time from the little Albert theory. And the third major theorist in the behavioral psychology would be B.F. Skinner of 1948. So B.F. Skinner talked about the operant conditioning, and it says it's a learning process where behaviors are influenced by consequences. So he says positive reinforcement encourages behaviors while negative reinforcement strengthens them. And in his experiment, he used animals in a Skinner box to study the reinforcement and unreinforced behavior. So the box objectively documents the animal behavior over time to prove his theory. An evaluation of the work of the key theories in social psychological perspectives. Erin Tanchfeld and John Turner's social identity theory suggests that people's identity is shaped by their social groups, which can be based on religion, gender, or race. So, the psychological perspective believes that when people belong to a group, they feel they have a boost in their self-esteem and they belong to something which is greater than them. So looking at psychology perspective further, it emphasizes the importance of social categorization to say we have social identity, social comparison in most cases, and then we have the positive distinctiveness in group membership. I'll be comparing the similarities between behavioral perspectives and social perspectives in psychology. One of the in three different ways, subheadings. They are both similar in nature, nurture versus nature, and determinism versus free will or research methods. The social psychology agrees that nature defines a behavior, while the behavioral psychology also feels the same way. And under determinism versus free will, the social psychology agrees that internal mental processes act in a predictable way. And the behavioral psychology feels that our gene shape our behavior. In research and methods, the social psychology generally connected to empirical research techniques. Likewise, the behavioral psychological perspective also makes use of empirical research techniques in carrying out their findings. The difference between behavioral and social psychology would be also in three subheadings. Nurture versus nature. The social psychology believes that a person's behavior is influenced by both nurture and nature, while the behavioral perspective believes that uh, they focus on how people focus on how the brain and genetics influence human conduct under nature versus nurture. Social psychology believes that under determinism, there are people who can be self-determinists, while the behavioral psychology perspective believes that it's likely to be individuals can be hard determinists under the determinism versus free will subheading. Under research and method, social psychology uses personal observations and empirical research, while the behavioral psychology uses mostly empirical research to carry out their findings. In this slide, I'll be looking at the evaluation of the application of social and behavioral psychological perspectives to contemporary issues in the society. The behavioral psychology perspective, just to be a brief explanation, would be it places a strong emphasis on how learning influences a person's behavior. According to this viewpoint, all behaviors are acquired through contact with the outside world, while the social psychological perspective examines how the real perceived or suggested presence of others affects a person's ideas, a person's opinion, emotions, and actions. Application of behavioral perspective to contemporary issues in psychology would be, as seen on the slide, they are applied in three different ways, which I have pointed out here in education, in mental health, and in addiction. In education, the behavioral principles are used to shape classroom techniques and manage a student's behavior. While in mental health, behavioral psychology is used to reduce the conditioned reactions of frightening stimuli, using methods such as exposure treatment to treat PTSD and phobias. In addiction, the behavioral psychology is used to change addicted behaviors and helping people learn principles. Learning principles are now applied. While we consider the application of social perspective to contemporary issues in psychology, we're looking at them in three different headings. Contemporary issues that social psychology addresses would be reducing stigma, health and wellness, and social concerns. It's applied to reduce stigma such that it examines and offers resources to reduce or lessen discrimination and stigmatization around obesity, mental health illness, and illnesses of all sorts like HIV and sexually transmitted diseases. In health and wellness, the social psychology perspective gives insight into how behave, individuals' behavior promote health or disease. Under social concerns, social perspective provides conceptual frameworks for comprehending and resolving difficulties such as racism, sexism, and all types of discrimination. Evaluation of the strength and limitation of the behavioral and social psychology application to contemporary issues would be the behavioral psychology focuses on activities that can be observed. Its concepts are simple to implement in treatment and interventions. Understanding the intricate interactions between people and their social surroundings is made easy by social psychology. So, in strength, both of them focuses on activities that can be observed. While the limitation of this psychology's perspective, both social and behavioral, is that they solely a solely behavioral approach may overlook the significance of internal emotion and cognitive components. Sometimes a strictly social approach could ignore biological or cognitive distinctions at the individual level. So both viewpoints provide quantifiable realistic methods of dealing with issues in the real world. Application of social psychology perspectives to explain behavioral, to explain behavior in a real world scenario. In this case, I'll be looking at conformity. A real world scenario could be in a certain meeting where several workers support a manager's decision. Despite privately disagreeing with this manager, they choose to keep quiet. Like nobody will say a word about it. And applying it in this context would be conformity is how social psychology explains this behavior. People frequently change their beliefs or actions to fit in with a group. They avoid confrontation or they gain social acceptance either ways. So even if they disagree, people may change their behavior due to normative social influence, wanting acceptability, or informational influence, believing that others know better, so they choose to just flow with the group. And this demonstrates how group pressure influences individuals' decision making and how they choose to behave. In conclusion, behavioral and social perspectives in psychology provide key insights into learning. Two, each of these perspectives helps us to understand the individual behavior from different angles. And finally, understanding this perspective improves therapeutic practices. These are my references. I have included my references in my draft, which I will be uploading with the PowerPoint as well. And thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Thank you.